Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got Tanya rejoining us. It's been a little while. Seb is back from the jungle. Good to have you both on here. I am very excited, as you should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all of those good things so you get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which this morning is quite early. So let's get into it. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means put them up in the comment section. I don't have any to pull up right now, but we will pull them
They're
up.
slacking.
Right?
What?
Can't wake up in the morning, I
The
tell you.
heck?
People have lives, I guess, instead of just hanging out with us.
Maybe they weren't aware of the timings of our new game called Today. What the heck?
I'm pretty sure I posted about it
Yeah, I
yesterday,
know.
but
I'm going to chirp at some people.
we're going to chirp at people all day long. It's going to be fantastic. But today's topic is philanthropy. All week we're going to be talking about philanthropy, indeed, actually. And I'm going to give a quick definition. But before we do that, let's get a quick intro from Tanya, because it has been a while. So 15 seconds. Tanya, who are you? Where do you come from? All that good stuff. Go.
I'm based out of Montreal. I am essentially a visual artist, illustrator, designer, photographer, dabble in some martial arts, and somehow became befriended by you guys.
Yeah. I don't think it was somehow. I think minds kind of started to meld at one point, and now we're all just one giant homogenous being.
I think she's the catalyst for most of that.
I could not agree more. I think 100% right on that one. Now, philanthropy today. So let's get a quick. I'm going to go with an etymology today as to where the word comes from, and then we'll get into the actual definition of it, and then we'll see what you guys feel about it. So the etymology of philanthropy, and I think the reason I want to get into this is because I think the concept of philanthropy is misinterpreted on a regular basis. So the word philanthropy comes from ancient Greek, meaning love of humanity. And it is from phil, love, or fond of, and anthropos, humankind, mankind. And in the 2nd century CE, Plutarch used the Greek concept of philanthropia to describe superior human beings. Now, as for the definition, philanthropy is a form of altruism that consists of private initiatives for the public good, focusing on quality of life. But just some general thoughts in there. Let's start at the bottom, Seb. What are your first thoughts when you hear the word philanthropy?
My first thoughts are, what am I doing here? Am I? No, I'm just joking. From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the definition almost sounds like it should fit individual actions that are not related to any organizations or financial. But really, it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be that in order for somebody to be a philanthropist, they have to be somehow engaged in, helping one way or another the overall collective, but generally with funds, generally with, presence, so that funds can be accumulated. So I don't know. That's sort of the definition that I have, that I know of it.
Absolutely. Tanya, what about yourself?
Well, initially I had messaged Chance going, "Why am I on this podcast about philanthropy? Because I'm not a trillionaire who can donate unicorn hides to starving children." So initially I had more of the entrepreneurial, ultra rich person donating a wing in order to further the collective. But as I've been doing my research on it, I don't really have a definition, but more of an outcome where my questions and ideas on it get more into the philosophical domain. So that would be my quick summary on philanthropy.
I like it. Shaun, first thoughts?
My first thoughts is we're going to have to come back to superior in a sec. I'm for reals. We're going to have to come back to that as part of your definition, superior. Just ping, just fired off a little flag in my melon. But before I do that, just want to state that my initial interpretation of whenever I hear philanthropic or philanthropy, my first position is to go to, I wonder who's going to give a boatload of money. Who's the guy or girl who's got a big thick wallet who's going to donate right now? That's kind of how philanthropic individuals have been identified. Someone who's really rich and is giving a lot. But I kind of have two parallel streams when I think of philanthropic operations or philanthropic missions or philanthropic directions, because you can throw all the money in the world at a problem, but unless you fix the problem, you just spent a lot of money and achieved nothing. So the philanthropic nature of it isn't simply the action of giving away money or donating something. To me, philanthropy requires outcomes. So, you know, if you're a billionaire and you think that you're going to solve, I don't know, let's pretend you're going to solve climate change as a billionaire, and you think that a way to do that is to flush millions down the toilet and keep flushing. Your idea is to flush money to fix the world. Well, the outcome is zero. So was it philanthropy or was it just spending money? So to me, the philanthropic is the outcome. And that's important because a lot of people have a lot of ideas and they want to fix the world, or they want to fix their community, or they want to fix their friends, or they want to fix the world, whatever the case is. And unless they're doing it the right way, it's not philanthropy. It's just burning dollars without any outcome. And so I think that there's a difference between feeling good about giving versus feeling good about giving and creating outcomes. I hope that makes sense.
That's a great point. Seb, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, just, about that is it really what it comes down to with that in mind is essentially intent, right? What is the intent? So the outcome is one part of that, but at any given day, you can have really good intent and not reach the desired outcome, right? So for me, it's more about what is the intent behind the donation or the money that you're sending away, and how are you supporting because everything is very multi-pronged, and I think we tend to oversimplify things because that's what makes sense to us. But as far as for somebody to be truly invested in that and truly invested in changing an outcome, as Shaun was discussing, there has to be more than just the monetary piece. There has to be the monitoring piece. There has to be the follow-up piece. There has to be every aspect of the endeavor needs to be sort of known to the person that's engaged fully, not only with their money, but also with their time and with their presence and with their, the weight that they sort of carry as an individual. Because oftentimes those people are, public figures and people that are known. And so it's really interesting. I don't know how we make a week out of this, but it's an interesting concept for sure.
So I want to follow on with that now to the superior part, because it was thrown out as part of the definition. And I don't know, Chance, maybe quickly look up superior, but in my head, it's like if someone thinks they're superior, it's typically related to rank or status, or someone has been granted the perception that they're elevated above others, superior.
Yeah, I got it.
Do you have a definition?
Yeah. So it is higher than another in rank, station, or authority, or a higher nature or kind of great value or excellence, extraordinary. Would be
okay, so there's actually two different things going on there. There's the perception that they're higher than someone, and then there's the you are higher than someone, as I heard through those two. One's kind of a physical higher, one is kind of like, I think I'm higher. And so the idea behind feeling superior or being superior can be created through philanthropy. And so if you want to feel superior or at a higher elevated station above your fellow man, for lack of a better term, if you give $1 million to a charity, you write a check because you're a billionaire, you write a check, you hand it to someone, say, give them $1 million, and then you never think about it ever again because that $1 million was like not even a blip on the radar. Is that philanthropic? Is that philanthropy? Is that someone just making themselves feel like, yeah, I did really good today. I gave $1 million. I've elevated my superior status in societal norms. So I think you see where I'm going here. I think there's a righteous way to give money for the right reasons versus trying to feel superior above your fellow man. And I know that sounds crude, but it does make the point. And then there's the idea behind giving money for the righteous reasons and then monitoring it for the outcome. To me, that's the true philanthropy. Just like the collective here, we do our best every day, but we're monitoring what's going on weeks or months later to see if we've shifted the needle. That to me is philanthropy, is not a passive giving of time. It's an engaged giving of time. It's not a passive giving of money/resources. It's an engaged giving of money/resources. Otherwise, we're right back to the toilet and just flushing and not thinking. Money down the tube, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Tanya, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few in regards to, not that Shaun was taking umbrage at the fact that someone was donating money, but my thought would be, is it best to have to give what you have, I wouldn't say in excess of, but the most to give? Is that better? Say a billionaire's got tons of money, maybe not much time, so would it be better that he give his time and his energy or his money? And then this is, from what I understand of my early morning reading, it goes into, I guess, Immanuel Kant's philosophy in terms of acting from duty versus acting from accordance to duty. So acting from duty, the quote I saw is, "The only thing standing in your way of doing the right thing is yourself," versus acting in accordance to duty, which is, I do it because people think it's the right thing. And a really good example of that would be the Reddit shopping cart dilemma, where how they determine if a person is capable of self-governance is if they put the shopping cart away at the end of a trip. You don't have to. It doesn't impact you if you do. It doesn't impact you if you don't. But when you do it because you feel that it's the right thing to do, then according to the internet, that is an indication that you are someone who is acting from duty. And those would be my thoughts on the things that Shaun has touched upon.
I love that. The according to the internet, as that could be anything really.
It's a litmus test, right?
Right. And it's great. I was writing this down as you were talking about this. Tanya, was giving freely or giving because of any other reason. Those are two separate things, right? And my boys tried this at one point last Christmas, where they were like, "Do we have to give presents to people, or can we just keep them?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, don't you want to give presents to people?" They're like, "Well, no, I would like for them to have presents, but I kind of want them too. So do we have to? Like, is that part of the thing?" And then my wife and I were like, "Do we? Like, do we actually have to hand these out to people?" So I think it's an excellent question. It's a philosophical quandary. But Seb, what do you got? You got any thoughts?
Yeah, that virtue signaling is real, right? Like if you have an opportunity to virtue signal and it makes you feel good, or it gives you a tax break. So, but I think to act on the premise that most people are operating under those parameters, I think would be, I don't know, it almost exposes our insecurities in relation to this. Like I do not like that people will tend to automatically think that people that have money somehow either obtained it nefariously or are nefariously engaged in this thing, the other thing, or another thing. And it's interesting why we do that. Like, we do that because we don't have, say, the financial freedom that, say, said person will have. And, we figure that if we don't, then automatically there's probably something wrong with how it was acquired and why it's done and what are some of the benefits. And we can totally feed into that victim mentality, right? Like as we look at the landscape of philanthropic endeavors out there. But I think that if you look at some of the key philanthropists and you follow them sort of seriously, you're going to see that their engagement in whatever cause that they're taking on is generally multi-layered, and it permeates their actions. A lot of the times they will not support, they might support a few organizations, but there are going to be organizations that are, supported more than others, where their face is all over, or where they're, using their know-how or using their skills, knowledge, abilities to sort of support a certain cause. But, I don't know why I keep on thinking about this, but I keep on thinking about, say, Tom Hardy for Reorg, for example, like some of those guys that are essentially the face of these organizations, of these charitable organizations. And another sort of philosophical angle that I sort of went down a few time over is how people that have money, and in my experience, having a lot of friends that are very successful, I've seen some of those people be by far the most generous. And there is a sort of a, I don't know, there is almost like an expectation from people that have money should be giving it all up to all kinds of things to fix the world's problems. But none of these people are giving any of their money to anybody. So now it becomes the old, well, if I had that kind of money, oh really, would you? So I think that it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole of not only discounting the manner by which people became financially free, but also it bleeds right into they should be doing everything they could to make things better while I sit here waiting to be better,
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, Tom Hardy, that's a great example, Seb. I just saw a photo of him the other day on IG, and he was just like, it wasn't all chilled out. He was pretty sweaty from a workout, and he was just kind of sitting down, and he took it kind of from an angle sort of thing, and it wasn't like anything special. It actually looked like a genuine photo. One of the reasons I do like Tom Hardy is because he does come across as kind of authentic. Like, I mean, he doesn't pretend to be something that he's not as much as others do. I feel it's not that he's trying to represent himself authentically. He's just being freaking Tom Hardy. That's what I get from him anyway. But what's cool about that is because he at least appears to me or feels to me like he's authentic, when he wears something from Reorg, which isn't all the time, but when he's wearing something from Reorg, I know that he's doing it just because that's the dude he is, not because he's trying to fly the freak flag or trying to get all up in your grill and talk about Reorg or any other organization that he's in. He's just wearing a hat, or he's wearing a t-shirt, or he's wearing a rash guard, or he's carrying a shopping bag on the way to the grocery store in his beat up car or whatever. He's a guy that just comes across as an authentic dude. And so when I recognize that in someone, I pay more attention to them. I dial into what is he wearing right now, not because I want to follow his fashion style, because I've got very little fashion style. I'm not looking for pro tips on fashion. I'm looking to understand what he's genuinely portraying this day and how that's going to impact people around him. Because these aren't just, I wonder if his t-shirt matches his jeans. The things that he's throwing on either thoughtfully or thoughtlessly have ripple-on impact. And so in a way, having just come out of a week of culture here on the Collective, in a way, what he's doing is defining not a new culture, but I feel a cooler culture of philanthropy. I mean, it's not like I don't know if he's given a boatload of money. He's the kind of dude who might give a boatload of money to these kind of charitable organizations, but I don't know that. But what I do know is he's giving his time, and his time is worth more than my money. His time is worth a lot, I feel, given that he could use his time wisely to create all kinds of things in the position that he's in right now. But that doesn't diminish our time. Our time is the same value to some degree as long as we value our time the same way he values his time. And so how I look at his time, I attribute great importance to every minute that he has on the planet because he is impactful. Whereas my minute is not as impactful, but I still value my time as much as he does, maybe even more because I'm freaking older. So there's two interesting things there, how we value our time and how others value our time philanthropically.
Absolutely. Now, I just have a couple quick comments I want to hit on real quick before we carry on. We got Winter Storm joining us. Belated good morning. Good to see you, Winter Storm. And then he has a question. Do you give with the goal of people knowing you gave? Mm-hmm. And so this brings up an interesting point I was gonna bring up in a second here, but could it be that the essence of being a philanthropist or the essence of being engaged in philanthropy is giving of what you don't have or what you don't have a lot of, let's say, rather than what you don't have. So as per, I think Seb, you said it earlier, like, if you don't have a lot of money, yet you're still donating it. If you don't have a lot of time, but you're still utilizing it well, or if you don't have a lot of whatever, but that's what you're actually sacrificing a piece of something that you don't have a lot to sacrifice, but that's the thing that you're choosing to sacrifice for the greater good or for whatever it is, charitable organization that you're giving to. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? Does that make a lot of sense? And to Winter Storm's question, I think it kind of goes in that same line, is that then if you do give up something that you don't have a lot of, do you need the reciprocity of other people knowing that you gave it, or do you not? Seb, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit to unpack there, right? I mean, why are we even worried about that? Like, what am I worried about what this person does for and whatnot? And there's always a reason why you should be. There would be a benefit to, say, seeking to let it be known that you have given, and that could be encouraging other people to give. That could be encouraging some of your heavy wallets of walking around to, so it may or may not be self-serving. So even if a person did that, who are we to ascertain the reasons behind it? I think we're breaking down behaviors, very complex behaviors, and sometimes, as it turns out, people giving money or being engaged in a cause, it's the only thing that person can do because they really don't have the time to do anything else. But as long as they have sort of this underlying goal in mind of bettering the collective, there's always going to be somebody that questions the reason why they do it or how they could have done it, or it's no different than anything else. And generally these people are high profile, and if you're high profile, well, with that comes the gauntlet. But it's just an interesting conversation to have, and I always ask myself, like, why do those conversations almost always go the same way when we start engaging with people about people being philanthropically engaged in things? Automatically, and this has been my experience anyways, it's almost like the conversation goes nefarious all the time. It's like you're going down, you start by assessing how they got their money, and then you start thinking about the benefits of giving it away, and then but the one thing that you don't do is say, maybe that's a good person that wants to make a bit of a difference, and that's how they can contribute to the cause. So it just kind of feeds onto itself, right? Like, yeah. Ultimately, we don't know is the answer, right? We don't really know unless the person is extremely genuine. And I agree with you. I echo your thoughts, Shaun, on Tom Hardy.
Yeah. Tanya, thoughts?
I wouldn't say I'm at the same level as Tom Hardy, and my contributions to the collective are there, but I think that it may be a tangential thought, but in regards to the shopping cart dilemma, I've been that person that will put away my shopping cart. And not only that, I saw that the shopping cart was a complete disaster area, and I put them all away. And I suppose I was just focused on me in a sense. I wasn't thinking this is going to be great for everybody. I just went, this is the right thing to do. This annoys me to see this example of human selfishness, and I sorted them out. And then the security guard, who I presume he was standing there, and I presume he has to put them away. He saw me and he was just like, he was extremely thankful. And and that, I think that small exchange is an example of one of those times where it's a good thing if someone sees it, because he might have had his faith in humanity slightly restored. And for me, I don't care if people see these things, because my own personal philosophy is that it's that how you do anything is how you do everything. So this small act will ripple into the rest of my life. And perhaps it is selfish and not altruistic in how I want to maintain a certain level, a certain way of being. And this is how I do it. And this is how I improve upon it. So that would be my thought on it I think it's a good thing to know that people know you gave, if only because, to butcher that Gandalf quote, it's those small acts of kindness that keep the darkness at bay.
I like it. Any geek reference I'm happy with. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, that's good. So, to the question, do you give with the goal of people knowing you gave? I think sometimes you have to, and sometimes you don't need to. So, I'm looking at Seb as a fine example of this, though he may not have considered this as the answer. So, Seb gives a lot. And I'm just singling out Seb. We all do. I'm going to single out Seb because it's an easy case to make. He gives a lot publicly, but he gives a lot privately. I know how busy I am privately, trying to help the collective or trying to help others around me. But I think Seb is busier. But a lot of people don't understand that. They don't know that because we don't chirp about it a lot, how busy we are trying to help others in the shadows. But it's fact. And so if no one knows that, is it happening? And if it isn't happening, is it encouraging anyone to try and do their part, to try and make their part happen? I think it's important that people know from time to time, do you give with the goal of people knowing you gave? I think we have to from time to time. I think we have to, like this conversation is an example. Here we go. We're all giving our time freely, at least an hour. I'm deploying overseas like immediately after this podcast. The entire reason that this podcast got shifted in its timing was so that I could make the podcast. And so there's 3 other people in this podcast who had to make sacrifices to make this timing, for all of us to volunteer for the collective to be philanthropists in this moment. We're not giving money. Yes, we are. We're giving our time. Of course we are. Our time might be more valuable than $1 right now. At least for me at 60. I feel like an hour of my life is worth more than an hour when I was 20. And so I feel the moment of philanthropy. I feel the moment of being charitable in this moment. And so unless we propose out there to people who are listening to this that you don't have to give $1 if you don't have it. You can give a minute if you've got it. And everyone's got a minute. But how many minutes do you give? Well, if I'm going to use Seb as the example again, well, maybe Seb gives 100 minutes a day as a philanthropist, but you might only see 20 of those minutes out there publicly, whereas 80 of those minutes are in the shadows. And so maybe 80% of Seb's philanthropy is invisible to the masses. But I think that more of it should be visible. But the trick is, I suppose, without distorting it into either Seb's opinion of flaring up his ego or Seb getting a total grip on his ego, still doing what he's always done, and then other people misinterpreting it as he expands the awareness of how much he gives for the community. It's a tricky balance because for me as an example, whatever I do privately or publicly, if I start changing that ratio of being too public with my private philanthropy, well, if I did it too fast or rolled it out too aggressively or demonstrated what I do privately to the public masses, if I did it too fast, people might think, now it's a brag. Now it's a humble brag, or it's a total brag, or whatever it is, like, and distort it in a weird way. Whereas I think sometimes it's easier just to keep quiet about how much you're trying to be helpful in the shadows. But that isn't solving the problem of people not learning about it or not understanding about how it can be done and the benefits that it can create. So I find myself right now, currently, not just today, but yesterday and the day before and all the days prior, I find myself in a tricky balance between I'm not sure how much public-facing philanthropy versus private philanthropy that I should discuss. So I'm going to throw this back to you guys now.
I'm going to go to Seb. What do you think?
Well, I think we need a Shaun Taylor documentary, and everybody would say so. I'm going to get you, boy.
I second that motion.
No, I couldn't agree more. Everything, as it turns out, and as we're finding out more and more, and the more engaged we get in these conversations, the more it always there's one common or commonality seems to be, anyways, in our conversations is balance. And I feel like we as human beings, and I'm going to go down the philosophical route here a bit. I feel like we as human beings, we live in extremes. We live in all white or all black. There is no gray zone, and that's part of the reason why there's so much divisiveness, in the world at current times, is because I'm looking at the world through this lens. You're looking at the world through a completely different lens. Therefore, we are in total disagreement. Like, there is no common grounds that can be reached on along the way. And I do believe that balance is generally the answer to most humanitarian problems or problems of humanity, as it were. And I like that. And what it does is it forces you to look internally and to do some introspection as to perhaps questioning the reasons why you're doing things. And when you are doing them, at some point, does it change? Do you live long enough to see yourself become the villain? It's just one of those things where you need your periodical touch-ups to see if the mission that you have in mind, or if the outcome that you are seeking and your actions are still lining up, and if the underlying reason why you're doing certain things and being engaged in philanthropic endeavors is change or has changed, and you're no longer doing it for the right reasons. Now you have a problem. Nobody else does, but we have a problem. You have a problem. And I don't know how, but it has to be achieved. That balance has to be achieved in order for you to, maximize and optimize sort of the positive, I guess we'll call it the positive outcome, of your engagement.
I like it. Tanya, thoughts?
Honestly, my whole thing would just be a rehash of what Seb said, because in my notes, I've written in regards to how much to reveal in terms of your philanthropic efforts and engagements. It's more how it feels in my body, to sound very therapeutic, but it's just simply truly your gut feeling. And if you're nervous about it, that's fine, but then there is a reason, or there is an opportunity to have introspection and go, why are you nervous? Are you scared of judgment? Are you nervous because it's a nervous type of energy where you're desiring external validation, so on and so forth? And by doing that, at least you can trace where it comes from. And if it comes from a place where it passes that mirror test, right? In how can I look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day, knowing that I did this action? So basically a parroting of what Seb did. And also another remix of that is to find that balance, you have to be out of balance, no? Because there's no other way. You have to go, oh, I've gone too far, and then recalibrate. So essentially just a big old rehash of what Seb just brilliantly said.
Nope. But that's a really good point. Can I jump in just for a sec? You know, when you look at the balance, yes, having left and right of arcs is always a good thing, but also sometimes looking around and having yardsticks may prevent you from necessarily doing too much or too little. Like if you have enough situational awareness, and if you have enough sort of awareness of what's going on in the world around you and the people that are doing certain things and where it backfired on them, and so if you're kind of interested in that piece, you can sort of navigate the waters a little bit safer than jumping on the boat and say, I'm going to go until I drop off the face of the earth, and because you do. And I think that failing to learn from other people's behaviors, or where things started backfiring on them, is really the perfect way to never learn from anybody else's mistakes. So make sure that you do all your own mistakes, because you must, and that's necessarily not the case. And so yes, balance important. I'm not sure that you have to go out of balance to find balance. I think that sometimes it's a byproduct of going out of balance, but I think that other times you can use other parameters to judge to balance yourself in between, maybe more effectively.
That
That's
makes
a really
sense.
fascinating
Shaun,
conversation. Go ahead, Tanya.
Thank you. And no, that does make sense, and I see that point. And maybe this is leading us on another path, but how do you find that balance of looking to others to find balance? Because that is something that a lot of people do in order to achieve what they think is equilibrium, but it's primarily stagnation. Such as, Tanya went and did this thing, it didn't work, therefore I'm never going to try. And I think it's important to keep in mind the paths others have forged, and look at the pitfalls, but also you still will have to forge your own, because they're not you, and you're not them. So, mine is just a question of how do you find balance that way?
This is fascinating. I have a thought on this, but Shaun, you got anything to add?
I do. I think in order to understand our own personal balance, we have to understand our tipping points. And so our tipping points, well, what are they? I'm going to reference 2 potential tipping points, how someone can easily understand what the tipping point is in the moment. One is you can internally observe yourself and see if you feel like a jerk, or you can look at the crowd and get a read on it. And so let me give you 2 examples. One is, many years ago, I was riding down a trail and I bumped into some people who were working on the trail as volunteers, a single track mountain bike trail. And they had their shovels and their axes, and they were doing their thing and they're working on it. And I locked up the brakes and said, "Hey, boys, what's going on?" And they said, "Yeah, we're just doing a volunteer trail building evening. You want to give us a hand?" And I looked at them and I said, "Boys, I am so freaking busy right now. I can't help, but can I give you $100? And the moment that I said it, I was like, "God, that was so dumb." Because I felt it inside of me. I felt how dumb it was. Because by saying that, my intention was right. My intention was like, not honorable, but it was righteous in the sense of, well, I think that $100 could go a long way to either buy beers, or it could buy a replacement tool, or it could, in some way, as a proxy, donate my time through dollar. But they just wanted my time. They didn't want my money. They just wanted me to be part of the game, not have my dollar be part of the game. And I felt it inside, man. The moment that I said, I was like, "Oh, I read the crowd wrong." But my instinct was righteous. Like I wanted to be philanthropic. I just did it wrong. I read it wrong. I didn't appreciate the moment for what it was. And I've never forgotten it. So there's one tipping point where I realized how to do it poorly, Shaun. And then the other aspect is when you do it right, like the tipping point of doing it really well. And so because we're flying today, I think of, what will I do maybe today or tomorrow in the way of philanthropic efforts? but it made me think of every country that we go to. At some point during the trip, I try to not identify someone. I just let it happen where it feels right. And it could be someone who is someone in the food industry who's just delivering the food that morning to the table that I'm sitting at for breakfast, or it might be dinner, or maybe we're in a place at 2 or 3 days in a row and there's maybe someone, I get to know their story a little bit. Maybe they've got a kid, maybe they don't, maybe this, maybe that. And as their story gets a little bit richer in front of me, I feel more connected to them. And then I will give a large amount of money to them and say, have a good one, and then bounce. Because I know that amount of money in that particular country will go a long way to make a big difference in that individual's life. But for me, it's like a small amount of Canadian dollars. Once converted into whichever country I'm in, it's a lot of money that can help someone recalibrate their life to some degree. And so, though I'm not rich or extremely wealthy or whatever the case is, we all have enough resources, either time or money, to make a big impact in someone's life if you choose that person correctly and understand that the resources that you're giving has big impact. And so the parallel being that small amounts at the right time can make big outcomes, versus if you have $1 million in your hand and you're giving it to an institution that wastes money at a burn rate of 95% and only creates a 5% outcome. Well, those are two radically different things. The institution doesn't even know they got money before they're burning it. Whereas the individual in front of me, though it's a small amount of money, they are going to have their lives changed to some degree, at least for several days at least. And so it's not that I'm saying you've got to choose your charitable efforts wisely so that you feel good about the moment, so that you feel like you made a huge impact. But why wouldn't you want to make a bigger impact than a non-impact through a nameless, faceless organization that isn't going to move the needle? Now, is that unfair to a lot of charities out there? I'm not trying to make that case. I'm not saying that choose wisely, don't choose charities, choose this, don't choose that. I'm not saying you've got to choose anything. I'm saying you've got to think about the impact that you're having in the moment. As I stated at the start, philanthropy doesn't exist until there's an outcome. Otherwise, you're just burning your money and feeling good about it. But if you're changing the world, you're changing the outcome to some degree, and what degree is up to you. Well, the more you change it, the more wisely you're using your resources. And so I think you need to understand your tipping points. You've got to face that person in front of you and realize that you just really helped them out a lot. Bam, there's one tipping point. You've got to stop in front of a bunch of dudes who are building a mountain bike trail and do it wrong and feel that moment. And then figure out like what works best for you somewhere in the middle. That's my thoughts.
This is going down the line that I was thinking of earlier, and I'm here for it. So I have two thoughts on this, and then I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. Is the fact that the impact of whatever it is you're giving, whether that be time or money or effort or anything other than that, is strictly based upon the value that you place on it integrally, right? So if I have money and I recognize that I have money and I know its value and I can give that money to a certain organization that I know is going to do well with it, awesome. Then the impact that I'm going to be making with that money is going to increase in my mind versus what the actual impact is. So as an example, back when I was in the Army, we used to give to the United Way every year. There was always this big drive within the regiment. Everybody, well, let's all donate. We'll give it to the United Way. And then I found out that at the time, the United Way was only 5% of what it was donated was actually making it to whatever organization. And I was like, no, I'm not giving 95% of whatever I'm donating to the corporation to not give value. And so I was recognizing that what I was giving wasn't being utilized well. And so based on that little storyline, the thought that I had was the fact that I think we have it wrong in the Western world. I think what is seen normally is that actions themselves are a binary system. You either act or you don't. And choice is a spectrum. But I think in reality, the choice is binary and the actions are on a spectrum. And I'm going to elaborate that just for a second. But if I choose to be kind to a server at a restaurant, that choice is either I'm going to be kind or I'm not. How kind I am is based on whatever, that's the spectrum that I get to choose from. So for Shaun, he says, oh yeah, I get to know the person and then I'm going to leave them a big tip and they're going to have, I'm going to make impact in that person's life. That action is a spectrum because I could just be kind and learn about that person and that could change that person's life based on the moment. But the choice to be kind or not, that's the binary portion. And I think in the Western world especially, we have those backwards. So what do you guys think on those points? I know it was a long elaboration, but Seb, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
I think you must have microdosed this morning. That was a pretty amazing. 7 layers deep with Chance.
Going downtown. Let's do that.
That was actually a very good point you brought there, and I do believe that we have a lot of things backwards in the Western world. So I think that's just another one of those. Do we have it completely backwards, or my problem and my contention is always the same. Like, what are we investing time in generating thoughts in relation to certain other people's actions, and somehow subconsciously, consistently either cut them down or assign nefarious meaning or whatever the case may be. So I go back to something I said earlier, but let's tie it into what Shaun was saying earlier in relation to him offering money when they were asking for his time. It brings me down to this other piece. You're in a relationship, and that relationship is, has a degree of toxicity or it doesn't, and you are doing certain things for the person that you love, but those certain things are unappreciated because those certain things are not the things that the person wants you to do, right? So does that make that the effort that you are making to try to show up for the person in a way that feels more natural to you, or in a way that's more conducive to sustainability for you? Looking at this, I had it completely backwards. I shouldn't have offered X, Y, and Z because the person wanted A, B, and C, right? You start to flip the sort of the paradigm here. It becomes a paradigm shift almost. So my question is this to myself: is what Shaun could do at the time, or came up with to contribute to the cause at the time, was that less than what he should have offered on account of what the recipient wanted? Because if that's the case, like, we have bigger problems, right? Like, we're gonna go around all the time and not act as ourselves. We're gonna act as what is the person is needing from me. Whereas I think it's very important to be ourselves, and it's very important to do the things that we can do to help. And what's important is that communicated intent, right? Not so much whether or not it was exactly what the person or the recipients or the end user needed. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
I'm tracking. Tanya, thoughts?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a truck that's decided to park directly outside my window so let me know if the noise is too much. But I like Shaun's use of the words tipping point. I think that's what I meant by out of balance, is to find those moments of needing to recalibrate. And what I took from your and Seb's passage was that I think it's about ensuring compatibility, essentially, between need and act. Because I I was listening to a podcast of MMA fighter Justin Wren and his foundation Fight for the Forgotten, and he talks about how there are charities that come in to build water wells for the pygmy people in the Congo, and the thing is that they don't actually consider the needs and limitations of the infrastructure or what the people genuinely require. So they'll build wells that require a level of maintenance, require tools that the people don't have, and then it becomes essentially a white elephant, right? Because it's hindering them now. Versus organizations that perhaps use the indigenous population to collaborate with them, to upskill them, and provide them exactly what they need in order to thrive and to be autonomous. Because oftentimes, it's actually one of the things in my notes is, when does altruism go too far? When does it become enablement or a sense of paternalism? And I don't know if I can segue into a question for you guys, because there has been, you guys have a love of humanity, and sometimes it's about finding that balance of when does feeding the ducks actually start screwing them over versus providing them what they need?
That is a great analogy. I like that, Shaun. What are you thinking?
Well, I'll try to match the velocity of analogies then. So using the wells as an example, the pygmy wells, we'll call them. When are you building a well and when are you poisoning the well? And you can poison a well through intention. You don't have to throw a dead animal into a well to poison it. You can poison it through intention. You can poison it before you even start building the well, through the vibe that you give, through the just being a goof. You can have all the money in the world and try to build all of the wells in the world. But if you're a goof, all of those wells are poisoned because they're with the wrong intent. They're with the wrong thought. They're with the wrong delivery. So I think, talking about the server as an example at a table where it's a binary moment, and I appreciate the spirit of what you said, Chance, and it's really good. It's really deep. But I just want to take it up a few layers and or levels and make it a little bit more simple to make this point. You can decide to give money, or you can decide to give your time in the sense of interacting with that person to ensure that their day is better. Or you can freaking do both. You can deliver both. And you can use those two against each other. You can use them together. You can use them separately. You can intermix it throughout the conversation or the interaction or the days that you spend with that person. There's many ways that you can manipulate resources, time, money. Many ways. And until you start manipulating them, start interacting them, start using them strategically and tactically, then you only know how to spell resources. Deploying resources requires thought. And it also requires you to do it wrong. As I said, I've done. The tipping points that I didn't understand within me, now I understand them better by doing it wrong. Now I try to do it right. But sometimes I don't do it as right as I should, and that's another moment for me to recalibrate on how to do it right. Every year it's different. I am a different person every year, therefore I need to adapt every year to all of my stances on any word. Philanthropy, name another word. I've got to figure that part out as well this year, each year, every year. And so our balance is for us to learn and relearn and then relearn as we move throughout life. And interweaving those resources of time and money are things that we can manipulate on the daily.
Bam. And to your earlier question, Seb, this is how I'm going to extend it into a week, because we're going to go into the weeds. Tanya, what are you thinking?
I I think that I'd be inclined to agree. I'm not sure if I can take it to a different place, or if you want to continue this line of thought.
Yeah, keep going. I just saw you take your thing off mute, and I figured you had a point to make.
I'm not sure if we want to go here, but if we're going to go towards the Greek origins of the word philanthropy, and it's the love of humanity, I had a question regarding, I suppose, the dichotomy. So my lead-in is that Shaun possibly might have been in Rwanda during the civil war with all that going on. Seb has seen a lot of things in his time as ERT, and Chance has been through the worst of humanity by living in proximity to Edmonton and Fort McMurray.
100%.
So how do you maintain a sense of philanthropy after having seen the most horrific examples of humanity? And this is definitely for Chance. Brave, brave soul.
Yeah, well, first part is I live in Alberta, so that's just the key
This is
point.
for everyone, for the record.
I honestly, for myself, and this is a great question that I'm going to dive into some more tomorrow. But just quickly, I think personally how I maintain it is that it's what I would want. Is that I want other people to be altruistic, and therefore I should maintain a level of altruism just to do it. And to your point of the shopping cart thing, I do the same thing. I put away my shopping cart, and if there's 2 or 3 that are out of order, I fix them, and I get my boys to help me, and all those, I try to act the way in which I would like to see the world, and that's the quick answer. Seb, what do you think?
Hard to follow that one up. I think that's obviously a great way to live, and I do believe that, I continue to do the things that are right, and if somebody at one point or another sees them and either gets inspired or not, decides to share the news or whatever the case may be, it's pretty irrelevant to me. I think that we, even during the course of this conversation, there's an underlying mechanism that we as human beings are still sort of tapping into, and that's essentially, what are other people thinking of me and my actions at any given time? And it permeates everything. We're so worried about the prospect of being misconstrued or misunderstood, or I believe that it has the potential to impact the actions that we are taking on account of what we perceive the perception is going to be. And we need to really resist that urge, right? Ultimately, it has to be a decision that I make myself and in front of the mirror for the right reasons. And I don't have to convince everybody else that that's the case, especially a group that already has cognitive biases in the nefarious realm on account of I'm giving away money and therefore I must have a lot and maybe I didn't get it the right way and all these other things. So I think we can really, sort of stifle our collective impact if we are so worried about what the perception of actions is going to be.
I agree, absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Well, it's a big question with not enough time to fully answer, I don't think. But that's cool. It's cool. It's a great question, as I said. So very quickly, I think, if you've faced extremes in your life, or you've faced really bad times and you've faced really good times, well, good. Now you've got a really good bandwidth on how to understand the world around you. If you've got a very narrow bandwidth, then it's harder to determine when's the right time to do something and when's the wrong time to do something, because your bandwidth is super narrow. And when your bandwidth is really narrow, actions feel condensed. They feel like that tiny little space is so muddy that you can't properly understand what is good and bad in the moment. They're really broad determinations. But the wider your bandwidth, the more you've seen the extremes of the world, your bandwidth is so much broader that you can insert granularity. It's not as dense a space. It's not as muddy. You have more clarity, is what I will say. If you've faced enough, if you've seen enough, then you know enough. And when you know enough, then you can make good decisions on matters like philanthropic efforts. And so I know when I'm overseas over the next little bit here, I know the right person will bump into me, and I know that I will be philanthropic. And I know this much to be true. They will benefit, and I will benefit. And that's an important aspect that we haven't talked about too much on this equation of there's an external effort, but there's an internal recognition. And I ain't doing it to try to feel good about myself. I'm doing it for entirely different reasons. But that's for everyone else to figure out for themselves. You've got to understand you in the moment when you're in that position. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about donating billions or millions or thousands. Whatever you've got. If you donate to the right person at the right time and you feel that feel, and by donate I mean time or money, you'll understand how important it is, how valuable it is, not just for them, but for you. And then you can build off that.
100%. Now, we are a little bit over time, so let's get some final thoughts on anything we've gone over today on philanthropy, altruism, anything philosophical, and we've covered a lot. So let's get some final thoughts on it. Seb, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Shaun. Altruism is sort of a self-serving operation. Like it does, and I think to say that it isn't the case, is disingenuous. I mean, yes, there is nothing wrong with doing things for the right reasons, and there is nothing wrong about feeling a certain way or feeling good about having made a difference. And if you look at our careers, for example, and for me, it was never about changing the world, but it was about preventing the world from changing me, and also try to do as good as I could, in every single time I was out there. And I can now look at a 20-year career and say, I've truly done that. That's all that mattered to me, is that courage and conviction, that integrity that I had in conducting my business. Other people's interpretation, it is pretty irrelevant. But I do believe there is a certain level of self-serviceness in there, and there's nothing wrong with that, provided that it is a byproduct and not the main intention.
Absolutely. Tanya, final thoughts?
Yeah, much like Seb, I'm comfortable with a bit of self-serving byproduct in regards to helping people. And especially because a lot of it is that my misanthropic tendencies tend to be because the philanthropic side of me that is innately in me has been hurt. So part of continuing to be kind and help the collective can heal myself and also heal others. So while there is like I said, a balancing act to make sure that doesn't become the driving force, I know that I am motivated by my mission in doing what I can to make sure that, say, young women don't hurt the way I hurt growing up. And my last bit is that while researching, by doing philanthropic pursuits, that phrase, rising tide raises all ships. And while there has been a lot of talk regarding the outcome, oftentimes the outcome is not immediate or even known. So I think there is virtue in doing this without entirely knowing the outcome. And I'll make it quick because I know he has to go. But a quick story is that my grandfather was cycling home somewhere in China, saw people by the side of the street. Their kid was sick, and he took the kid and the mom to the doctor. Later on, kid grows up, sponsors my mom over to Canada. I'm born, and then whatever weird occurrences happen, I end up introducing Shaun and Seb together, and then the collective. And not that maybe my grandpa is the one to attribute to all this, but it's to drive home the point that sometimes you just don't know the outcome of these weird these acts of kindness, and they can be pretty interesting. So that's just my closing remark.
Reverberation. I like
There
it.
you go. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah, ripple in a pond. That's something that is universal, that has been happening since time immemorial, but it's only understood until you try to understand it. It can only be seen by looking. These things are all around us constantly. The ripple. It never goes away. And I think that's a great way to look at things, Tanya. I think it's a great way for everyone to look at things. The tiny little actions that we have today ripple on through eternity, as long as our actions are correctly intentional, are correctly righteous, are honorable, are virtuous, are right. Those actions are good actions. And I'd encourage anyone to replay what Tanya just said and let it sink in on how small things can make big changes.
Yeah, 100%. To add to that, I think would be silly, so I'm not gonna. The only thing I can really add, the only thing I'm gonna end with is the fact that we have to learn what our bandwidth is. That's the first step. Learn what your bandwidth is. And then once you build that bandwidth up so that you can see the levels of the differentiations of gray in between that bandwidth and build yourself a spectrum, then you can act with intention. And you can act to build not only yourself, but those around you. And can you do that with us every day here on The Collective? We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.
See.
Bye. Thank you.